This little ditty is called Dancing on the River. It's dedicated to my friend Conrad Zwanzig, and it goes something like this. Like this. Dancing on the river is something I can do. It's given me high life, a spirit that is true. Oh, come and let me take you by the hand. Together we'll go dancing through the surf and sand. Together we'll go dancing through the surf and sand. And I can't find my way home. Through the waves and around the bend, I was born to roam. The Yampa cries and calls out, how much love can you give her? To tell the truth, you know where I'll be. I'll be dancing on the river. 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 Like this. Dancing on the river is something I can do. It's given me high life, a spirit that is true. Oh, come and let me take you by the hand. Together we'll go dancing through the surf and sand. Together we'll go dancing through the surf and sand. And I can't find my way home. Through the waves and round the bend, I was born to roam. The Yampa cries and calls out, how much love can you give her? To tell the truth, you know where I'll be. I'll be dancing on the river. 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 Like this. Go. And
well, hi everybody. Thanks for joining us for tonight's Voices of the Yampa presentation here. My name's Eugene Buchanan. I'm a longtime board member of Friends of the Yampa, former publisher of Paddler magazine and founder of paddlinglife.com. I moved the magazine here back in 1992 for one reason, and that's the Yampa River. It's been a big part of my life, as I'm sure it is for all of yours. The Yampa River Fund was launched a year ago, almost to this day, right here on the banks of the Yampa River. It's accomplished a lot in its first year. The Yampa's had one of its most challenging years in history this past year, and the Yampa River Fund was there to help protect it and preserve it. Tonight's show, we got a great lineup for you with songwriters, presenters, and more, highlighting the challenging year that the Yampa had. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Kelly Romero Heaney, the City of Steamboat Springs Water Resource Manager and the Board Chair for the Yampa River Fund, to talk about how the Yampa River fared in 2020. Take it away, Kelly.
So in January, we began 2020 believing and hoping that it would bring us only good things. Our snowpack was great, the Yampa River had launched, and we were gearing up to issue our first round of grants. So 2020 didn't work out exactly as planned, but it did show us what the people of this valley are made of and how important our river is to our livelihood and our well-being. Fortunately, those of us here in the Yampa Valley were still able to play in the snowpack in mid-March while everybody else was stuck on lockdown. Snowpack stood at 116% of the median on March 1st, 2020. And we were hopeful that this would be the year that our rivers and their life could recoup from the periodic years of drought and low flows that we had seen in the last decade. Snowpack held steady at 100% of median by May 1st. Again, low flows on the river was the least of our worries as we scrambled to homeschool our kids, work full-time remotely, and to schedule our grocery trips around the toilet paper deliveries. A month later, the snowpack picture looked much different. By June 1st, snow water equivalent stood at 69% of normal for the basin, and we missed that miracle May moisture that we've come to depend upon. But the river held steady thanks to our decent snowpack year, and we waited for the monsoon that is guaranteed to come as soon as the ranchers lay down their hay. But we waited, and it never came. By August, we had broken records for the hottest and driest summer in 130 years. This figure is a measure of the Standardized Precipitation Evapotranspiration Index, or SPEI, for the Yampa White River Basin this August. You'll see that the combination of heat and lack of precipitation drove an SPEI that far exceeded drought years such as 2002, 2012, and 2018. These hot, dry conditions landed the Yampa River Basin in the extreme and exceptional drought categories by October. So there's two things that we learned from 2020. Never take your health for granted, and don't take your river for granted. I, for one, was grateful to have the river flowing and cool through the hot summer days, especially with my two boys that are 3 and 12 that had been cooped up in the house for months. And we weren't the only ones. Coloradoans fled to the hills during the lockdown to seek fresh air and flowing rivers. And many of them came here to the Yampa River Valley to enjoy the beautiful Yampa throughout the summer and through Labor Day. None of this would have been possible if the Yampa River Fund team had not have planned for years like this. The Colorado Water Trust sprung into action. They worked out a lease agreement with the Upper Yampa Water Conservancy District and the City of Steamboat Springs to have water released out of Stagecoach Reservoir to keep our water flowing sufficiently cool and at flows that we needed to keep the river open through Labor Day. So there's a final lesson that we learned from 2020, and that's the importance of partnerships. The Yampa River Fund glued us together so that we can empower champions to build projects that will usher this river through a hotter and drier future climate. In spite of the challenges that we faced this year, the Yampa River Fund is strong, our partnership is strong, and we look forward to facing the challenges in the future. So here's to the Yampa River Fund, here's to you all, and here's to a better 2021. Thanks.
Hey everybody, I'm Andy Bauer and I'm the manager of the Yampa River Fund. And thanks Kelly so much for that presentation. You know, it really highlights the challenges that we've had this year on the Yampa River and really the need for the Yampa River Fund. This year we were fortunate to provide grants to 5 entities to do projects on the Yampa River to benefit the river and keep it healthy. Tonight, to highlight those 5 projects, please enjoy the world premiere of the Yampa River Fund grant video. Hi, I'm Andy Bauer with the Nature Conservancy and manager of the Yampa River Fund. The Yampa River Fund Steering Committee awarded grants to 5 entities to do projects on the Yampa River that benefit the river in so many ways. And the projects came from a wide expanse of the river, from Oak Creek all the way down to Craig. The Yampa River Fund grant recipients share common goals of enhancing water security for communities, agriculture, the economy, and the natural environment in the Yampa Valley while supporting a healthy flowing river, enhancing critical low flows, and maintaining or improving river function through a holistic approach to restoration of riparian and in-channel habitat.
Well, I'm Roy Tipton. I'm Director of Development Services with Moffat County, which means I'm the grants and projects guy for the county. Riverwise Engineering was our designer on this project. The idea here is to create an access point. It was really important to have access for handicapped people, and they worked with veterans to come up with a design that would work. So right here would be a ramp down to the water with a put-in so you could get out of your wheelchair into a tube and then float on downriver. And the other part of this project was the boat ramp, which had been washed out over time, so we're rebuilding that. The way it was is when you come down here to get onto that boat ramp, you really had one shot to get it, and then you had to literally climb up the bank to get out. It was unhandy. I've seen tubers come down and try to get out, and it was quite a challenge for them. With the river diverter slowing the currents down, it'll allow you to get in and out of the water and have much better use. So both of those projects require a lot of rock, a lot of large rock. We wouldn't have been able to buy it without the Yampa River Fund helping us in this project. That is one of the most important pieces here, and the project really hinges on us being able to get that grant.
Hello, my name is Ray Beck. I'm a Moffat County Commissioner. We have 400 plus acres of park here in Loudy Simpson, and this is just a piece of it. And given the fact that we haven't been able to use this as a takeout like we have wanted to in the past, this is going to give us that opportunity with an improved boat ramp and opportunities for our anglers, our youth, our handicap, our seniors, and ultimately families.
What I've seen from Steamboat all the way to Dinosaur, I've seen this community of Yampa Valley towns coming together to embrace recreation, and we're gonna bring it in right. The Yampa River Fund, those guys are what's making this vibe come alive here, and I see nothing but tons of growth and room for expansion in our area.
Hi, my name is Allison Meyer-Gould, and I am with the Colorado Water Trust. I am here today at the amazing Stagecoach Reservoir to discuss our work with the Yampa River Fund. The Yampa River Fund and the Colorado Water Trust work in partnership to try to keep water in the rivers during times of dangerous low flow. What happens is the water gets so low that the fish get into really hot water, so to speak, and also the habitat is limited. By increasing the flow in the river during those really high temperature times, we can help provide lower temperature water, which the fish like better, and also more habitat that they can swim in. In addition, what's really great about this project is it keeps water flowing all the way down through the city of Steamboat Springs, and that is really beneficial to all the folks who use the river for recreation. The Yampa River Fund was established to create a sustainable, locally driven funding source to keep this project going on a year-in, year-out basis.
My name is Caitlin Vo, and I am Trout Unlimited's Yampa White River Basin Project Coordinator. For nearly a decade, Trout Unlimited has been working with farmers and ranchers here in Northwest Colorado to help conserve cold water fisheries and improve local agricultural operations. In 2017, we started working with landowners on Lower Elkhead Creek to help address their ongoing resource concern and to help leverage support and funding to be able to implement a restoration project. A grant from the Yampa River Fund has helped move this project forward. The Yampa River Fund supports multi-purpose, multi-benefit projects that help not only improve the Yampa River, but the various water uses in the basin.
Hi, I'm Nikki Knoebel, and I'm the mayor of the town of Oak Creek. We're standing right next to our namesake. The Yampa River Fund grant will give us an opportunity to investigate and engineer the plans for restoration, green space, and the upkeep and upgrade to the creek, which is the backbone of the town.
Hi, I'm Jackie Brown. I work with Tri-State Generation and Transmission Association, and I represent Tri-State on the Yampa River Fund board. In general, the overall vision is to take this corridor through Oak Creek, which is obviously Oak Creek, and make it into an asset for the community.
Hello, my name is Michelle Stewart, and I'm the Executive Director of the Yampa Valley Sustainability Council. And the Yampa River Forest Restoration Program is really designed to enhance the riparian corridor, and namely to increase forest canopy cover of the Yampa River, to really reestablish a functional and healthy riparian ecosystem in that area. And we're really grateful to receive support from the Yampa River Fund, which has allowed us to purchase and maintain irrigation for those plantings.
My name is Carolina Manriquez. I am a forester with the Colorado State Forest Service here in Steamboat Springs, and I'm one of the stakeholders and partners involved with the Yampa River Restoration Project. The Yampa River Fund grant has allowed us to provide for irrigation to the cottonwood seedlings we planted last year as part of the restoration program.
For information about this year's grant recipients or future opportunities, visit yampariverfund.org.
Next up, a man who needs no introduction, but I'm going to introduce him anyway. Peter Vandekar of Backdoor Sports, located right on the Yampa River.
This old river keeps rolling through no matter what gets in the way and which way the wind does blow. And as long as it does, I'll just sit here and watch the river flow. My name's Peter Vandekar. I've been owner of a small shop in Steamboat Springs for about 35 years and have had the good fortune of being able to kayak and raft over most of the hemisphere. And one thing that I know for sure, it's always great to come back to the beautiful Yampa River that has the diversity and multitude of uses that very few rivers afford. Daddy, won't you take me back to Muhlenberg County, down by the Green River where paradise lay? Daddy, won't you take me back to Muhlenberg County, down by the Green River where paradise lay? This river fund has been a dream and ambition of mine for decades. It's so important that we keep our river intact, and the Yampa River Fund is one of the many answers we have for that quest. My favorite memories of the Yampa are just sitting on the Yampa and playing guitar with my friends and my family. Rolling down that old riverboat, leave old memories far behind. Rolling down that old riverboat, leave old memories far behind. Yesterday is slowly fading, tonight I'll be wasting all my time.
Next up, I'd like to introduce Marianne Capra, a local natural and cultural historian, talking about some historical aspects of the Yampa River.
My name is Marianne Capra, and I'm a freelance natural and cultural historian right here in Steamboat Springs. And I brought you to this spot, and you might recognize it. There's so much right here. It's the place that was the epicenter historically of Steamboat Springs. This is where the town began and grew. And it's actually where the native people, the Yampatika Utes, were attracted to come year after year in the temperate months. They were attracted to the water, the river and the other water. The mineral springs, a profusion of them, more than 150 mineral springs back then. And they appreciated the physical properties of the mineral springs and the spiritual properties. In so many ways, we know on planet Earth, water is life. But for the Utes and others, water is also death. And it was the reason our original pioneer family founded this town. When they arrived here, the river you see was called the Bear River. It was named by the mountain men and trappers who just spent sometimes a few weeks or a couple of months trapping animals here. They named it the Bear River because of the profusion of grizzly and black bear that congregated for the river and the springs all around it. Later on, as the grizzly bear is hunted to extinction in the state, the name of this river changes to a plant, a native plant, reflected in the name of the Utes, the Yampa plant. And this time of year in the autumn, when the leaves change and the first frost comes, you just pull the whole plant up and harvest it. And you peel off the brown papery part and you eat the tubers. Kind of a mix between a small sweet potato and a parsnip. So the Yampa River is what we have today. And people traveled on it to get here. People drank from it. People died in it too. James Crawford, pictured here, is considered the town founder. He was attracted to the mineral springs. His dream was to build a mineral springs healing resort, to bring the world right here to Steamboat Springs to be healed by the water. And the same reason the Utes have been coming. The third building, public building he built, pictured here in 1885, was a bathhouse. If you open that door, there was a dirt floor with a hot spring, just the right temperature for a bath, 102 degrees Fahrenheit. So Mr. Crawford names it the Bathhouse Spring. Of course, now we have no problems going into spring water in our swimming suits, but that wasn't the case back then. You would be modest. That bathhouse spring gets renamed the Heart Spring, and it's part of the popular resort we have today, the fitness center. The springs were a huge reason people came here. So many of them have been and are concentrated along the river as well as the creeks. Since the dream of the town was a healing springs resort, the Crawfords put their home right next to the river, just up from where we are today, this dirt roof log cabin. Right across from the namesake of the town, the Steamboat Spring, which used to be not only a beautiful mineral spring that you see here, but a geyser that chugged and hissed, reminiscent of a steamboat. Interestingly enough, a boat that never existed in the state of Colorado. But when you travel out west on rivers like the Mississippi and Missouri, you'd encounter a steamboat. And we had a geyser that sounded just like that. We still have that mineral spring, and it's right next to the river. For those of you who know this area well, this is such an important part of the town. There's a duck pond nearby, formed by many mineral springs. There's a gazebo with water people would drink the mineral spring water out of. There's a library nearby where the cabin used to be located, as well as the namesake springs. One of the popular springs of the past that you can see people drank out of. The Ute Indians even put their horses in this white sulfur spring. Sulfur is a mineral that, when ingested or soaked through the skin, increases stamina, energy. And so whether you drink it or your horses soak it into their skin or the bear lap out of it at night, it improves their health and their energy. Really close to where we are on the river right now today was the original skinny wooden footbridge that people used to cross the river. You can see from this picture, the river was wider than it is today, shallower in places. It was actually had quite a few islands as well. Some of them still exist today, some are missing. A really important one used to be used to cross over to the red light district. The river that you see was the boundary of town. Steamboat Springs was unique because it was a dry town in the west. That's so unusual. A dry town, no alcohol. Most towns in the west were founded by greedy, grubby gold miners and horse thieves and ladies of the night. And the first public building they would typically build is a saloon. Not here, not in Steamboat Springs, not with a healing springs resort as the dream and the Crawfords as the foundation of its values. You were not allowed to drink alcohol. But the boundary was the river. The town limits on the south side of the river, well, you could do other kinds of things. And the train industry required a red light district. Today, the neighborhood pictured here is the Brooklyn neighborhood, and it's annexed into the city. But that's where, at least for part of the history, you could cross the river, have a drink, maybe something more, gambling or something, and then cross back. But you wouldn't want your wife to see your wet pants from crossing the river. So you would try to use the islands in the river and build small bridges to connect so you wouldn't get wet. And here's a picture of Steamboat Springs in 1940, showing the downtown section. My finger is pointing at an island that no longer exists. Though we are so lucky to have this wild and scenic river running through downtown, there has been some civil engineering in the past, including the removal, the excavation of things like islands. Which brings me to my last story. Just down from where I'm sitting today, there was another one of these islands. It's not there anymore if you look downstream. And the pioneer Crawfords used that island as the first cemetery in Steamboat Springs. Likely, it was that way because 7 months a year we have snow on the ground here. And if someone dies in your family, you can't put a shovel into the frozen ground. So maybe your beloved one is sitting in the shed waiting for late spring to come. Not a pleasant thing. So the Crawfords used that island as the first cemetery, and they're the ones who named it Dream Island. And I think it was the profusion of mineral springs, including one directly behind me that's flowing into the river. Some of the springs are thermally cool or warm, only a few are hot. But there were more than 50 in the location where I am right now. There's about 5 left today. They still have an effect on the temperature of the river just downstream from here, where that island was. How much easier to cross in the wintertime through a skinnier channel to get onto an island that very likely is not frozen because the effect the springs had on the river water. So they buried people there. The first one buried was Uncle Johnny Tao, a prospector who liked to keep to himself. One day, James Crawford in the 1890s found a campsite up by Fish Creek Falls with some smoke coming out, but when he looked inside essentially the tarp, the canvas tarp, it wasn't his uncle, but that's how they referred to him, Johnny Tao. Very unwell. He could barely speak. He hadn't had water for a few days. He couldn't even move. He spends the night with Uncle Johnny Tao, brings him back to the Crawford cabin, nurses him, but he doesn't survive. So Uncle Johnny Tao's the first one buried in Dream Island. The second one is Pony Whitmore from the rollicking gold mining town of Hans Peak, where in fact he got drunk in the saloon up there and laid out on the wood chip pile all night. Wasn't doing very well after that. They hauled him down to the Crawfords, who tried to nurse him back to health unsuccessfully. Pony Whitmore was laid to rest next to Uncle Johnny Tao, and actually the town closed that day in celebration of the life of Pony Whitmore. The third person placed there was Shep Hutchinson, who'd gone to the Brooklyn neighborhood. Right around the 4th of July, all kinds of antics happened on that side of the river, the rodeo, the baseball fields, and the Brooklyn saloons and brothels. He was found a few days later in some weeds for the 4th of July celebrations, and he was buried there as well. This is a picture taken of Dream Island. It doesn't look like there's a river because it was a substantial island. This photograph was taken by the Crawfords, marking one of the grave sites there. Although the cemetery's moved and the island is gone, now we have a trailer home community named Dream Island. It's been a pleasure to share some of the interesting stories, but mostly I'm just tickled to celebrate the Yampa River Fund, the great work they've done already. I wish I could time travel 100 years into the future and find out what the historian and tour guide of that time has to say about where the state of the river is. I know it will be even better than today. Thank you.
We are really excited to have Nancy Smith join us tonight. Many of you know her as the architect of the Yampa River Fund for her tireless work in building the Yampa River Fund Coalition and the foundations that have created the fund today. The Colorado Water Trust just honored Nancy and the Nature Conservancy with the David Getch's Flowing Water Award for their work on building the Yampa River Fund. Congratulations, Nancy.
Howdy everyone, it's Nancy Smith, part of the original crew who got the Yampa River Fund started. I am so excited to be celebrating the first birthday of the Yampa River Fund. So excited to be with you tonight, wish I could be there in person. All of the real cowboys in the Yampa Valley are probably laughing at my hat, but I'm wearing it because next to the Yampa River, the thing I love most, second most, is making music in my Western swing band called Cliffside Rodeo. So I got my buddy Willie here from the band with me, and we have a little birthday song for the Yampa River Fund. What do you say, Willie?
Let's do it.
Okay.
1, 2, 1.
Let me tell you about the Yampa River Fund. Some good folks got together, and then they got her done. It weren't easy, but stick to it, just stuck with smart duct tape and a little luck. Oh, happy birthday, Yampa River Fund. Yampa River is counting on us all. Gather round now and heed that river's call. Yeah, it's time to cowboy up, the future is up to us. The Yampa River, it's for one and all. Some folks they can float that river in a big rubber raft. Some folks they use that river to go pay for their calves. And others drink that river right out of the tap. back and watch it flow past. Take it, Willie. Yampa River is counting on us all. Gather round now and heed the river's call. Yeah, the time to cowboy up, the future is up to us. The Yampa River, it's for one and all. The Yampa River, it's for one and all. Yeehaw! Happy birthday, Yampa River Fund.
Well, thanks, Nancy. That was music to our ears. Next up, I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Loretta Davidson, a longtime local and weaver who draws her inspiration from the Yampa River. She moved here back in the 1970s and later married into a fourth-generation ranching family right here in the Yampa Valley.
Oh, weaving to me is, it's therapy. It's cheaper than therapy. You're totally relaxed, but the subconscious is just going crazy with ideas and creating and what next and what shall I do and how can I make things more look like nature. And that's what I've always still done. Tried to come up with new designs, something I don't look at patterns, I don't want to know what anybody else is weaving. I want to just it be my innovation and my idea. So having moved to Steamboat in around 77, I really don't know the exact date, but moved over and rented a little tiny apartment from Kurt Weiss, which everybody would know him now, and then was able to buy this 50-acre, beautiful, tucked in the valley. I called it, you own your own valley, because you didn't see anybody. And we expanded and built this log house. It was really a cabin, 150 square feet, but it was lovely. And I was weaving away. And then I got into weaving, not the rugs and the tapestries so much as clothing. And I loved designing, so I would just make something. And I was doing then the cotton and rayon and dyeing all my yarn, which was where nature and the river comes into the influence of the colors that you see. I just wanted to duplicate them as much as I could. I would try to emulate the Yampa's colors and its structure and the way it looked in my tapestries. And I have always felt like the yarn is flowing just like the river does. My relationship with the Yampa is very, very loving, very concerned. It's been like a motherly relationship, even though the river is mothering me as much as I think I'm mothering it. You go out and you just be quiet and you listen. I have always had an analogy I have taught the kids that our lives are much like a river. We're in there flowing, but you can get stuck in the side of the bank, and that's where you are for a while, and that's just life, and you go along with the serendipity experience, and then it might come out again and you might go over a waterfall, and you're going to get to the other side of it. But it's the river's lessons of life. To me, life is just like a river, just like the Yampa. The river runs through our land, 1.5 miles of river, and it runs through our hearts, probably even longer. Oh, the Yampa and I are very good friends, and like any best friend, you should be incredibly thankful, and I am. I feel this is just absolute treasure to be able to be here, and I don't feel ownership or possession. It's just a short period of time that we get to live here and we get to use and enjoy and be inspired from this place on earth.
like the Yampa because it's very fun to swim in, to go tubing, rafting, and look at the cool fish. I like the Yampa River because I've gone on a lot of rafting trips on it, and I like swimming in it. Every time I come down, I can always hear the happy sounds of the river flowing. I like the Yampa because you can go boogie boarding in the waves, and I like to go to the D-hole, and I like to swim in the D-hole. It's really fun to play in. I like the Yampa rivers because how much fun it is, because you could go floating, and after you could float, you could like play with friends if they're there, and you could throw rocks, and it's so fun to go down D-hole. We can help the environment. We can make sure no one treats it badly. Cleaning the water and keeping it fresh for people to drink. Using reusable things and not plastic things, and not bringing things to the river that can kill fish and other animals that live in the river. Put the fish back in the river, not take them home and throw them in a fish tank or anything like that. We could not put so much trash in it because one, the trash kills the animals, and two, the trash makes the water really dirty. We cannot throw waste on the ground, and instead throw it in the trash and recycling.
When it gets low flows like it is right now, let more water out of Stagecoach Reservoir and use a little bit less water to try and help the fish and everything about the river.
I think the answer is yes.
Well, that wraps it up for the Yampa River Fund's celebration of its first year. You know, we can't be together tonight, but I think we agree the Yampa River still brings us together. And it really has provided quite a bit of solace in this challenging year. So a big thanks to Kelly Romero-Heaney and all the presenters tonight. And special thanks to the Steamboat Ski and Resort Corporation for helping us put this show on, and to Mountain Tap Brewery for offering great deals on meals and beverages, and for their special free flow beer that benefits the Yampa River Fund. You know, it's going to be a great second year of the Yampa River Fund, and we hope you stay in touch as we move through this new year, and thanks for joining us. Hey, Huge, do you want to take us out with a song?
Well, my name's Eugene and I'm here to deliver a song about the mighty Yampa River. Got the Yampa River blues, the blues don't you know. The Yampa River Fund helps it from getting too low. Well, fishermen fish it and kayakers play. It's never too late, so donate today. I got the Yampa River blues. The blues don't you know, got the Yampa River blues. The fund helps with its flow. Well, it starts in the flat tops, runs for 250 miles. It's home to endangered fish that look like crocodiles. Got the Yampa River blues. The blues don't you know, got the Yampa River blues. You know, it comes from our snow. Well, it's used by the cities and power plant stations, and ranches use it for their irrigation on the Yampa River blues. The blues don't you know, and that Yampa River Fund, folks, helps it from getting too low. So tubers come to tube it on vacation, and it's never too late to make a donation to the Yampa River Fund. I got them blues, don't you know. The Yampa River Fund, well, it helps with their flow. Well, the song is over before it's begun. It's never too late to donate to the fund. Got the Yampa River blues. The blues, don't you know. I got the Yampa River blues. The blues, don't you know. Well, I don't know where all the time went. It's just like the river down at the confluence. I got the Yampa River blues. The blues, don't you know. I got the Yampa River blues. Hell, it comes from our snow. Well, thank y'all for coming to tonight's event. You know where your money should be spent. That's with the Yampa River Fund. The blues, don't you know. I got the Yampa River blues, and the fund helps with its flow.
It was instilled in me at a young age that these are things to enjoy. Certainly something that's been passed on.
Were it not for the efforts of a dedicated group of conservationists, there wouldn't be a Warm Springs Rapid, and there wouldn't have been any opportunity to go back and look at the history that happened there.
Warm Springs, to me, demands a lot of respect from river runners.
You know, I'm not sure how I started on the Yampa, but it's just one of those experiences for me that, you know, I can't give up.
Yeah, there is no feeling like dropping into a rapid. Each of those experiences will be unique.
Anytime you come down here, you don't really know what to expect.
You know, you're not really a boater until you have a big swim. But that's where it happened to me.
The Yampa it's the last. It's like an endangered species.
In 1965 on the Yampa River, Warm Springs Rapid was nothing. It was just a minor riffle that nobody even ever commented about because it was such a small rapid. There was just a little drop and a few waves. But in June of 1965, a big storm developed in Utah and started moving east. Huge thunderstorm. So as the storm moves east, June 10th, 1965, there's all these various trips on the Yampa River that don't really know what's going on. The first one to see Warm Springs Rapid was a private trip with George Wendt.
First of all, it was just really interesting to go back up and look at the amazing debris of boulders. We spent some time marveling at the fact that we had survived the night before.
One of the guys on the trip, a guy named Bruce Julian, commented how there was an old cabin there right by the spring. And he was in there for a few minutes and it was just as wet, he said, in the cabin as it was outside. So he left the cabin, went to find his friends who were a little bit downriver, waiting out the rain, and they heard a rumbling sound, and they said it was just like freight trains. It was this incredible noise. And they looked, and all of a sudden here came the whole hillside.
Once I realized what we had witnessed, I mean, it's a formative experience for me. I mean, I've thought back to it many times. I could have just been gone.
And it wasn't just a flood, it wasn't just water. It was huge boulders and logs and trees and all kinds of things. And that cabin that Bruce had been in, 5 minutes later, that cabin was right in the path of that.
But it was interesting to hear stories of people who were camped upstream and people who were camped downstream because they were very aware of the same amazing rain event.
But it was really raining, the river was really high. And the next day we took off and the rain had quit and we were above Warm Springs, just floating along. And all of a sudden we see a small plane come down into the canyon. And it was actually Bus Hatch with some pilot. And he dropped us a note in the life jacket that told us that Warm Springs had been made really bad.
We went back down, and the first group that came through the next day was a Western River rig, and just the guide took it through, and he did a good job, but he was not able to land for about a mile.
Just upriver, there was camped a hatch trip. There were two boats, two 27-foot pontoon military boats. Al Holland, who was one of the boatmen on the trip, had hurt his leg skiing, and so a while ago, and he was still recovering, so he brought his brother Bob along to help him row and help him with the baggage and everything. The other boatman was a guy named Les Oldham. Al had all the Boy Scouts, and he said they complained bitterly the whole time because it was just raining. They couldn't even cook, because in those days they all cooked on fires. So they couldn't cook because it was raining so hard.
They didn't see the evidence of the flash flood like the Western group had, and so they just ran into it, and he was flipped out in the rapid, and they did not find him.
We commented about how slow the water was. We commented about, oh, here comes the thundering locomotive of the Great Rapid, because we're trying to cheer up these Boy Scouts who are absolutely, abjectly miserable. And got down to the rapid where I could see the slick. Les was ahead of me, because we were not anticipating anything at all. The last thing I remember seeing of Les was him pulling on his right oar to straighten his boat for the first big hole. But the first big hole was tricky. It was moving downstream. It's the most interesting water I have ever run. The holes were moving. We were there early enough in the river reclaiming its channel through the debris pile that it was resorting everything that had washed down. The boulders were booming, the big holes were moving. He straightened up. I No idea how we went in the water. Nightmares for years. All kinds of different scenarios waking me up in the middle of the night. How did he go in the water?
I grew up next to Hatch's boatyard when I was just a kid, and we were down there playing in their boatyard all the time. Bus introduced me into river running when I was about 15.
Bus was one of those guys who would go out and do an adventurous thing when most people wouldn't. They'd pick up guys that would kind of wander down to the boatyard and say, "Gosh, I'd sure like to try this." And they'd say, "Well, we'll give you a try, son."
When Bus Hatch and many people first started running rivers, they used wooden boats. And in a wooden boat, you could only get 2 or 3 people, and that became kind of a problem on a multi-day river trip. And when Don Hatch convinced his dad Bus to go to Salt Lake and look at the surplus inflatable boats, it was a big change in river running because, number one, you could carry a bigger load, more people with the gear for a multi-day trip. People designed all kinds of rigs from those surplus boats. So the inflatable boat was significant in bringing a lot of people down the river. And among those early groups was Harold Zandheiser and the Wilderness Society and David Brower and the Sierra Club on the Yampa River.
In the late 1940s, the Bureau of Reclamation decided they wanted to build a big dam in the middle of Dinosaur National Monument. And it would have flooded Yampa River, the whole Yampa River Canyon, would have flooded the green all the way up into Browns Park. And a real grassroots movement started to defeat it. And a letter writing campaign, that's when the Sierra Club got involved. And they wanted to raise their consciousness. So they started putting together these trips that would go down the Yampa. They would have literally 125 people. As an outfitter, they came to Bus. He was the only person with the expertise, the only person with any boats.
I've done Warm Springs enough times to know that, it can be benign or it can be horrifying. And it all kind of depends on the water conditions.
When you show up at the put-in, you never know what you're going to get from one year to another. It's always different. It's not like going to Disneyland or going to a dam-released river where flows don't fluctuate that much. This is a wild, dynamic river. Probably one of the last dynamic rivers that I can think of. And that's the appeal. Whether you've been boating for 20 plus years or you're new to boating, the Yampa has that appeal because it's so raw and it's so natural.
With that hydrograph, Warm Springs changes daily and it becomes this monster of a rapid. At high water, at 26,000 cubic feet per second, Warm Springs has holes that'll eat Greyhound buses. It'll just blow your mind. And then at lower flows, when you're canoeing it, you have to portage it potentially. And it's a mild, class 3 mild rapid.
One thing about a river that's free-flowing is you go down at different levels. Every level, the rocks are different. Every level, the rapids are different. And sometimes there are no rapids here, and other times there's big rapids.
That's what's different about Lador. In Lador, almost all of the rapids are essentially stabilized now because they do not get big enough flows to push stuff through. But the Yampa is a dynamic river, and stuff is always moving around.
The role that a dynamic river plays in shaping landforms and creating these unique habitats for native fish and native plant communities and great big cottonwood associations, all of that just is part of the Yampa experience.
Experience is the thing that wakes up the intuitive side of learning, that undefinable, intangible element within our psyche and within ourselves that connects us to the rest of the world. And when they come out here and you get on a river like this and you experience, you start to see the river as a river.
Warm Springs, when you're there doing it, really lives up to its reputation.
Your whole life is distilled right down to that instant, those 2 oars in your hands, your feet on the bar, and your skills. There are a few adrenaline rushes like the top of a big rapid.
So you want to be prepared. And to be prepared, you want to be running the rapid on the right side so you can get set up.
And the water goes from calm to, mass acceleration all at once.
But there's a lateral.
You have to break through that lateral, and that's often the key. If you don't break through that lateral, you get surfed into the big wave train, and then you're basically screwed because it's really hard to get out of it. That wave train leads down to the giant hole called Maytag.
When I think of Warm Springs as a rapid, I think about the wild Yampa River. After a big peak water flow and you get to the bottom of Warm Springs, you're high-fiving your buddies, you're totally jazzed. It's kind of that wildness that you get from that connection to this wild river and wild rapid.
The things I love so much about it are the things everybody loves about river running. I think I really grew as a person just by having the opportunity to float down the Yampa River.
We have to keep in mind that the river conservation movement really started on the Yampa. Let's learn from the past and see this thing through. Let's protect this river.
Rivers have a profound effect on people's lives.
Warm Springs Rapid on the Yampa River is so interesting and so full of history.
It is a special rapid. Even at levels where I know this is a piece of cake, I'm still thinking, I wonder what it's going to look like.
This river, we need to respect it.
Recreation is a really general term. When we talk about the Yampa, the recreational opportunity is to be here, to be on the river, and to really understand firsthand how the river shapes the land.
We need to keep this place wild.
That is a river I can fall in love with.